Good quality seeds and plants are important to having a successful garden. However, if you aren't careful, the expense of those seeds and plants can become quite high. There are several tips and things that you can do to make best use of your seeds and plants and even save a few seeds for next year. When you're buying seeds, there's a couple of things to think about. One, you can try to buy a packet of seeds that matches the size of the space you want to plant, but often seed packets have more seeds than you care to plant at one time or in a given year. So one thing you could do would be to find a friend, a neighbor, or a relative that you can split seed packets with so that you only have half of that expense. Another option would be to use only the seeds you need and then store them in a cool, dry location, usually in a plastic bag, even sometimes in a refrigerator or freezer, to keep those seeds fresh for next year. Most seeds will be viable for 2 or 3 seasons, and then you only have to buy seeds every so often. Another way to make the most efficient use of your seeds is when you're planting. It's a challenge especially with small seeds, but try your best to plant the seeds at the appropriate spacing to start with, because then you're only going to use the seeds you need rather than planting a whole seed packet and then having to thin those out and losing half of what you paid for. If you're going to be planting plants or transplants in your garden, usually tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, things like that, then the first thing to think about is, if you've never grown plants from seed before, it's a little bit of a challenge, even though it can be cheaper once you get the hang of it. But there is that initial investment in the materials needed to start your own plants from seed. So if you're only going to use a few plants, it may be cheaper to buy them from a nursery or a garden center. If you're going to be needing lots of plants, it's easily going to become cheaper to grow them yourself once you've made that initial investment. There's also the investment of time involved, so that's another consideration. Some plants you need to use transplants, specifically tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. Other plants like beans and corn and cantaloupe, watermelon, squash, it's really cheaper and easier almost to buy the seeds and plant the seeds directly in your garden, and that's another good way to save money on those plants. When you're buying transplants, you've already made that investment in buying a good quality plant, but then you want to make sure that you get the best bang for your buck by planting them at appropriate spacings. And that involves knowing the size of your garden space and how many plants you need before you even set foot in the garden center or nursery. So there's no reason to buy 10 tomato plants if the space you have really only allows you to plant 6 tomato plants. So you want to be very careful and even measure your garden area so that you know exactly how many plants you can fit in, and then plant your plants at the appropriate spacing, not crowding them together or spreading them too far apart. That way you're going to get the maximum yield out of whatever your garden space is.
For more information, visit your local extension office or visit our website at kansasgreenyards.org.